totally how it works. I'm like, order me a drink. I'll be there in 15 minutes.
She did one day after she did Kat Coburn. She's working until 7:25.
Yeah.
I'll be there. How are you? Those Facebook posters had them.
Good afternoon, everyone. That's supposed to make everybody fun.
I noticed that.
I love that feeling when the room quiet. But now, as start over. I had this whole thing prepared. I am Steve Diskin. I'm the chair of industrial design, and I'm extremely pleased to welcome students, alums, family, friends, preachers large and small, to day 2 of grad thesis presentation. As I'm sure you know, this is the important culmination of a good 2 semesters of work on the thesis itself and the semesters that precede that, where these amazing students acquire the skills of industrial design, but much more importantly, begin a very important process of their own growth. That's what we care about, the individual, the personal character of the designer. And I think we're really proud that we're sending an amazing cohort out into the world to kick ass and to do good. That's our mission. Of course, it's with mixed emotions that we do that, because we've all worked hard together, but we wish everyone a good continuation of the voyage from here on out. Before I forget, there are a number of announcements. First, a series of thank yous. I neglected yesterday to acknowledge the second-year students whose job it is, and they took it on well to help in any way they could with the setup and assistance in making these presentations professional and effective. Thanks also surely go to Laurel Voss, who as acting assistant chair has outdone herself in really helping these guys pull this together to this point today. So thank you, Laura. Big applause for her. Yesterday I announced it at the end and realized it's much better to do this at the beginning, that when we conclude here, 6:30-ish, let's say, after these 7 presentations, you're all invited to join for exhibition and a reception just a few blocks from here at the venue known as the Candy Factory. I'm telling everybody Candy Shop. At the Candy Factory on Washington.
124 Washington Avenue. It's
Right.
on invitations, and it's in the back of the books that were on receipt.
So make sure to join us there for the merriment and festivities that are really the celebration of the end of thesis presentations. That starts at 7. I would like to introduce the thesis mentors whose specific and very hard work contributed to the high quality and success of the presentations you're going to see, starting with Professor Bruce Hanna, who's in the back there. Henry Yu, right in front of Bruce. Andrew Schloss, who's standing over here. Unfortunately, I have to report that Fred Blumlein, who's the 4th advisor, is ill. He thought he'd be able to make it today, but he was not able to, so he sends his apologies, which I know are very sincerely felt, and best regards to him. There are in addition, several teachers. Well, let's say I see 2 of them who teach at grad level, who have also made important contributions to the work of these students. So I present Professor Ignacio Urbina, who's just joined us at the beginning of this academic year from Venezuela, and Katrin Mueller-Russo, who's been a tireless fighter for high quality and good design education here, and you're both crucial to our program. So I've probably said enough. I'm very happy to see everyone. It's wonderful that you're here, and we proceed then straight away to the presentation. So thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Andrew Schloss. I'm one of the thesis advisors, as you just heard, and yesterday was a fantastic day, in my opinion, and really excited for today, and really excited to introduce Liz New, who's going to be the first presenter this afternoon. And I just want to say that I think it's been a great year for Liz. I mean, she took on a tough project, tough in a number of different ways. I mean, by her own, using her own words, her project involved muck, mayhem, filth, decay, horror, the grotesque, reality, and more. And yeah, they're your words. That's good. And, you know, it was a tough project, and it was tough at times probably to convince us, and she was determined, and she followed through, and she worked incredibly hard, and really did a really, really beautiful job. And I'm proud to let her take it from there.
This is really and truly exciting. My name's Elizabeth New, and my thesis topic is uncommon appeal, the aesthetics of the grotesque. So, my thesis on common appeal focuses on the aesthetic of the grotesque and its successful application in designed objects. In this case, objects for the home. Everything I'm interested in has some sort of link to the grotesque. But all of this really began 3 years ago in ID Tech, when I designed a trowel for Vincent Price. And it morphed into an entire set of movie-themed related gardening tools. What I didn't realize then was that the grotesque has a long and varied history and has been defined in many different ways by many different types of people in many different types of media. The grotesque has grown from a descriptive term for the type of ancient Roman art discovered in caves and grottos during the Renaissance to become an aesthetic notion covering concepts of the abnormal and their effects: distortion, hybridity, excess, disgust, horror, laughter, the ludicrous, and the satirical. The grotesque is about reality. It is about accepting that life is part of death, that the gross and the strange are a common byproduct of human existence. The grotesque is a combination of the ridiculous and the horrific. It is the acceptance of all the imagery with which a subject is presented. It is the investigation of reality as it is, excluding nothing. The grotesque as a design aesthetic is playing a more recognized and commercially successful role in our modern world. Taking all of this into consideration, what I really wanted to know was, is it possible to introduce a diverse collection of objects into the home that are not physically grotesque, but that harness the ideas and the elements within the grotesque that we encounter in our daily lives, without making something that is horrible to live with? This quilt from the Kentucky Historical Society archives is a perfect example. Lovingly crafted, this quilt contains the names of everyone in Elizabeth Mitchell's family. The coffins on the outside of the quilt were her living family members, and as they passed away, the family members were moved into the center of the quilt and into the cemetery. As I began to investigate the grotesque in my own life, I discovered that nothing was filthier, weirder, or more fantastic than the streets of New York. I created a blog called Magnificent Filth as a way to photograph my daily encounters with the grotesque. And I continued to look at quilts and their ability to contain both a sense of comfort and beauty and the ability to speak to the dirt and the filth of the world around us. Marrying classic technique and pattern to the grotesque of our everyday world. I used the photos in my blog to create yards of fabric. And part of what I love about the work is that as I compiled it into the quilt, and where the concepts of the grotesque really shine through the most is in the sense of surprise and revulsion when you realize what's going on the surface of this quilt. My next project was inspired by the tradition of wonder cabinets, where private collectors house specimens as well as the Natural History Museum, which also speaks to the world around us. I wanted to be able to take the experience of the presentation within the museum and transfer it into your home. So I returned to the topic of quilts, and in my research came across this modern-day classic, the canning jar quilt. And again, I began to design fabrics and to create my own virtual cabinet of curiosities. These works explore experiences that are linked to perception, expectations, and turning them on their head. But from far away, the quilt looks like any other jar quilt, but the surprise is as you draw close and you see what's in the jars. The textile patterns led me to wallpaper, which enjoys a widespread popularity in interior decor, in part as a reaction to the sterile work environments in cookie-cutter homes and apartments, as well as providing the ability to hide conditions of existing walls that have cracks or other flaws. In tandem, I continued with my interest in photographing the grotesque, and I traveled to Eastern State Penitentiary, the longest running prison in the country, open from 1829 to 1971. By creating wallpaper out of the images of the prison, I'm bringing the decay of the building, the remnants of everything that occurred there, into your home. Every space has a history, and history is ugly. But that doesn't mean that your home has to be. A lot of things are attractive about housewares is their tactility. Perhaps you sleep naked beneath your sheets, or you walk on your rugs with your bare feet. I wanted to take advantage of those sensations and thought to myself, what wouldn't you walk on? So I returned to the photos from Magnificent Filth and chose an image of a wooden board on the ground with splinters, staples, and pieces of paper on it. I then took my idea to Star Oriental Rugs in New Jersey, where they helped me to create a prototype of my pattern. I chose a color palette based on the image, and we sent the image to their factory. The factory sent us back a rough sketch and began the weaving. Made of wool and silk, the rug arrived on Tuesday of this week. And though it does not look exactly like the photo of the board I began with, it has a familial relationship and evokes an abstract world of dirt and filth without being overtly disgusting. As I spoke with people and continued to do research, I found that taxidermy was something that many people found grotesque. There are many different types of taxidermy, but there is only one woman who teaches taxidermy in New York. And so I took a taxidermy lesson with Susan Jiven and followed in the footsteps of Walter Potter, a Victorian taxidermist who specializes in creating anthropomorphic taxidermy, where your animal has human attributes. It was fun and educational. Yep. If you have questions afterwards, I will answer them. And the results of this class inspired my next project, Lucky Rabbit. How often have you seen a foxtail purse or a rabbit foot keychain and thought, why are we carrying parts of animals around? The grotesque is often linked to ironic humor, and that is what I'm portraying with this toy. Mimicking taxidermy, it is a stuffed animal that speaks to our history of children's books, such as The Velveteen Rabbit and Watership Down, where a children's scenario is taken to its real and disturbing conclusion. The lucky rabbit foot isn't lucky for the rabbit. This is a way of using humor to acknowledge that there are other places that rabbits exist outside of Alice in Wonderland and the Easter Bunny. Now, this next project will not come as a surprise to to those of you who know me, most people, when they find a dead bird on the street, they leave it there. I picked it up with a piece of wax paper, put it in a lunch bag, carried it home, and put it on my flatbed scanner. Then I threw it out. But I used the image, so now I needed to put the bird on something. So, in one of their many sketches for Portlandia, Fred Armisen and Carrie Brownstein act as hipsters, putting birds on things. They say, put a bird on it, spruce things up, make it pretty. But they are completely and totally upset with the reality of a bird. So I made ceramic decals out of my image and applied them to the surfaces of plates. These prototypes play on home items available in popular stores, as well as artists, hawking bird-adorned wares, and a general propensity for designers of all types to add birds to the things they make without considering the reality of the animal itself. From here I began thinking about tableware in general, and I returned to ceramics to make a set of cups. These cups, thrown, glazed, molded, and slip cast, bear the marks of each step in the process of their creation. In its treatment of organic forms, the grotesque acknowledges life, and in the same way, these cups exaggerate the physicality and process of organic growth within a manufactured object. Finally, I wanted to create some lighting for the home. And part of the grotesque is intermingling opposite extremes. But how would I get from here to here using this? Once again, I returned to ceramics. I dipped dried out leaves from the autumn in porcelain slip. I let them drip dry. I hung them from little clotheslines in the studio, and I fired them. And when they came out of the kiln, they were perfectly translucent. I went looking for a metal grate from the metal salvage yard, attached hardware to all of the leaves, and hung them from fishing line. Memento mori means remember your mortality, and the chandelier implies beauty and delicacy, along with old age, disintegration, and death. The quality of light and the use of materials is creepy and uncomfortable, but beautiful, evoking a sense of walking beneath the grates of the subway or into a damp basement of an abandoned home. These objects bring the outside world into your home, erasing the boundary between internal and external, interior and exterior. The user willing to incorporate these alien elements into their home shows a willingness to engage with life, with existence on an honest level. Part of the job of the designer is to reflect on people and things, to react to culture and to ease or change it, to make a world and to tell a story. I am telling the story of our everyday existence and using that to challenge comfortable assumptions about normality, beauty, and the ways in which we make sense of our world. In using the filth found on sidewalks and subways, the death of familiar things, and our fear of the unknown, I am using the territory of our daily life to open your eyes to the objects around you. I am elevating objects for your home from common housewares to uncommon design. Thank you very much. If you'd like to turn the lights on in the back, I'm happy to answer questions. Nobody? Really? Not even about taxidermy?
You touched on it a bit with like the rabbit tails and stuff, but have you thought more about this application to fashion and like these fabrics that you use to adorn the body?
I have, but to be honest, I had absolutely no idea how to make clothing, and it seemed to me that adding more stuff was not going to happen. I would love to make a jacket out of the head jar fabric. I think it would be amazing, like a motorcycle jacket. Oh yeah, I would wear that every day. And so, you know, I think that there's a lot of potential in the fabrics, and it's just a matter of seeing what I can do with them. Bueller?
Okay, then me.
The what?
Okay, me.
Yeah, do it.
Yes, I will. Congratulations. You took on a difficult topic, and it's come a long way from when you first told it to me. Beautifully presented, very professional and convincing, and you put your whole soul into it. Right? The images are stunning. It's provocative. And we begin to experience this strange transformation of things we would find revolting and find the beauty. I think you led us through that beautifully. What I wonder is that a lot of it had to do with sort of surface applications, and that's fine. Had you done any stuff with making real objects sort of more uncanny? Seeing if you could do it in,
I think
products that
I
are
think that's
objects.
a really excellent point. And I was finding, I have some sketches and some models that I felt like leaned more towards that slide in the beginning where you're like, oh God, I don't want to live with this. And it was really difficult to find something that gave you that feeling of like, ugh. And also gave you a feeling that you wanted it to be in your home. And I feel like that's something that I'd like to continue with into the future. And it's an extremely valid point.
Yeah, I think finding the uncanny and the spooky and all of these things which aren't necessarily grotesque somehow also fits in this in this category.
I do feel like the leaves do it a little bit in the chandelier, and that I have pieces that you can pick up at the show tonight if you guys want to take a closer look at things. But that one side of those pieces is very clearly a leaf, and the other side has this really like drippy, like untextured, like slightly like nebulous feeling to it. And I think with more time I would be able to push that further, but you gotta stop sometime.
You also give new meaning to the idea of rabbit prototyping.
Well, thank you guys.
Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to change up a little, change pace a little bit. We're the designers of the Pop-Up Factory, and it's a joint thesis project. And we're going to introduce it with a quick video, and then we're going to tell you guys about it.
My name is Kat Coburn, and the Pop-Up Factory is all about connecting the designers with the manufacturers and the consumer, the end user, and making a continuous feedback model where everyone gives and takes from one another. I feel that the consumer needs to know about that process and the labor that went into that piece, and see it when I have it readily available to them. Should they want to know more about it and where are the origins, how through the Pop-Up Factory, we got to see people react to see how hard it is to actually make a certain component of like a piece, like the stool, and how much magic it goes into making just a stool seat of spun aluminum. just seeing their reactions to it was kind of fun.
My name is Wyman Mastin, and the Pop-Up Factory to me is a training program to help consumers and designers connect over education. Kind of just saying start from the flat base. You want to be careful because you don't want to like put it all. Being able as designers to share our knowledge about making things and manufacturing items, especially in the United States. So the Pop-Up Factory will definitely provide this.
Okay. Hi, everybody. This project is a collaborative effort between Kat and I. We both have separate theses, but this allowed us to explore kind of a much bigger workshop idea. The main goal for this, we wanted the project to educate the consumer of designed products and expose them to new skills. How are we going to do this? We did it with a workshop, the Pop-Up Factory. To try and create a closer relationship between stakeholders, from designers to consumers and everybody in between. And then also try to produce all of this locally with products either from the United States or directly from New York. We came up with an organizational process diagram that kind of helped us keep all the players straight. The designer, the master craftsman, the participant as the laborer, material, the actual manufacturing act, and then finally the object.
So our job as designers was to actually create the design, obviously, source all the components that we could, document the entire process so that we could show it at the Pop-Up Factory, and hold the Pop-Up Factory. For coming up with the design, we wanted to have a product that held all these traits, a usable product, have it be apartment size since we are in New York, something that isn't intrusive, have multiple components so that we can demonstrate the different processes that were involved in making each of the components, and then be able to do it as students on a low budget.
Very low.
Very low budget. So, so trying to decide what to design, we looked to what we use on a daily basis, and we realized that the perfect piece to create was literally right under our butts. So we decided on creating a stool. For its multiple components, the materials that are very different, so wood and metal, and we figured out right away where we could get each of the components. To create the design, we looked to the current market and realized that we wanted to kind of be around the $40 range if possible, so that we can lure in willing participants.
And so the next step was to create an inspiration board that kind of gave us the aesthetic quality that we were looking for, the industrial feel. We started sketching, coming up with a design for the legs, the seat, different arrangements, and then started detailing out each component and the process that we were going to use in order to manufacture it. And this is the final rendering of the stool in here. So we have the stool components detailed out and designed. Now we have to figure out how to make them. and so the next part, we're going to show you how the approximate fabrication time and then the price that it took to get this done. We began with 15 stools, or our goal was to design 15 stools, and started with the wood parts, which are the legs, and then the top plate that's underneath the seat. They were all CNC milled, and all the legs for the 15 stool took about 8 hours to mill out. We then laminated the legs to give them more strength, because they started out as 3/4 of an inch, and now they're 1.5 inches. This didn't really go according to plan. Whoops. I don't think that we factored in as much labor that went between the two of us just to get the kits ready for the workshop. But in the end, each piece of wood, which there's about 9 per set, was about $3.60.
So to create the top plate where you sit, we looked to the laser cutter here on campus, or in this department on this floor. It took 2 hours to create and cost around $2 a piece. The seat that we created was spun by Francisco, that we met through IDSEC and Bruce and Henry's class. That was the most expensive component out of the whole seat, coming out to $14.40. Then utilizing more resources we here at Pratt, we physically bent these rings from straight rods. It took about 6 hours to do. I welded them together so that they were a complete ring. And then we had Wyman drill holes so that they were ready for the pop-up factory. Overall, the hardware and gluing was around $6 a seat. So knowing and having all the components ready and organized, we held into the store, we held the pop-up factory.
The first pop-up factory was on March 24th in this exact room. And we had 11 participants put together the kits. We had everything ready for them. And they each paid the material cost, which was about $40. This whole process, I think we each learned something very different about our specific theses. But when they left, we got them to answer a survey, because we want to keep doing this and we want to learn. So the feedback was really positive, but there's definitely things that we needed to change. So from that point, we designed a website. We got on Facebook to help push this forward, because we got a lot of good feedback. But we also did a slight redesign of the legs and a few other components to help it be easier to manufacture and put together for the participant. The future of this, we're holding our second workshop at Wanted Design on May 18th through the 22nd during Design Week, and we're really excited about that. We have 20 new stools and components ready to go, and hopefully you can sell them all. And that's the pop-up factory. Now, this being a little bit different, because this is Kat and I, we're gonna each give our specific thesis talks now, beginning with Kat. If you want to go ahead. So just hold your questions until each one of us get through our own things. Unfortunately, our thesis advisor is not here today. Fred is quite sick, so we're going to be introducing each other.
Not like you.
She's mad.
I am not.
So, without further ado, I would like to introduce Kat. She is a very special person. She is arguably the glue that holds this class together. I think no one would say anything else. But this is her thesis, and it melds design and business. And as you saw, it has a lot to do with the pop-up factory. And Kat, I'm sorry, but go ahead.
Okay. Hi. I'm Kat. I'm gonna cry. Okay, this is my thesis, a design goal. I want to start off by reading a letter that I composed in my thesis paper. I hate you, Wyman. I want to start off
off by reading part of a letter that I composed to current and future design students. Okay. We as designers have a great deal of power within our creative minds and hands. Some of us have that power is transferred from the end user. I can't.
Take a minute.
Take a minute. Okay. Sorry. We as designers have a great deal of power within our creative minds and hands. Some of that power is transferred from the end user, whom in most cases dictates the direction of our designs. Designers have the ability to take insights from end users and turn them into a product or service that is actually needed in the market and inspires innovation, which brings our potential value to companies that we work for and with. So be cautious when putting pen to paper and or click that mouse or trackpad and consider the implications. When developing this thesis, I inherently wanted to focus on, of course, design and the designer. Duh. But what about design and the designer? Well, they are both involved in a business, of course, and they both serve the consumer. So I pose these questions. How does business affect design? How does business affect design, and how do we designers affect business? And overall, how does the consumer contribute to both aspects? So throughout my thesis, you will see these icons that will help with a visual aid. From the beginning of my exploration process, I found myself compelled to incorporate my business background as I developed what design means to me. I saw so many similarities between business and design that they seem to be one and the same. For me, they both take a lot of creativity and innovation to do. There is plenty of resource gathering of some kind, and if all goes right, maybe not according to plan, there is a great chance for gain under high levels of risk and uncertainty. Above all else, business and design work hard to create and provide the products and services to the end user. At the other end of the spectrum, there are, of course, many differences between the two that cause problems and frustration that may hinder the way that they do business. One of these differences is in the way that they communicate with one another and how they receive feedback. Though communication is never that simple, there may come a time when you find yourself as that one designer up against or versus so many suits. It seems utterly daunting to think of that now. Through my research, I found that this can be somewhat attributed to the fact that the cycles of which each party bases their process on does not help this communication process. What's familiar to us is the design cycle. Though there are different versions of it, they are all pretty much a revolving process that mainly includes us, the designer. For a typical business student, and what I have learned, this is a typical business cycle, which is measured through the amount of time a business exists by the gross profit margin and or the popularity of the business in the market. Most businesses reach a peak or a point of maximum profit within one cycle of business. The business then hits a point where it is on a steady decline rate, reaching a recession, not making much of a profit as they were before at the height of business, until the business reaches a point of reevaluation, the trough, where changes need to be made to the business or it will cease to exist. Should the business create a change for the better, it is expanding until it reaches the next peak of its lifetime, if it gets to that point. For us designers here at Pratt, is more or less like a curvy S-curve. Kind of like backwards. However, usually when the design is incorporated into the process of business, we are usually an afterthought. Ideally, both cycles should be communicating together throughout the whole process, filmmaking like a crazy roller coaster. I began thinking how I could show this physically to a business and designers, realizing that both groups utilize surfaces, the design a drawing table, and business a conference table or like a head of the office desk. So I began creating sketches and making models, and figuring out what angle I wanted the frame to be at, and came up with this design with the adjustable, one side being adjustable. Design is represented at drawing height, as business is represented at the conference table height. The frame links both surfaces together, and the gap between shows the disparity of communication. The design side moves down to be level with the business surface. The gap in communication, the gap in communication where designs die. And we're not even sure why most of the time, because it's not clearly communicated to us why. I feel that they should be level and equal on an equal playing ground. The gap is smaller because there is always going to be that disparity, but we can try to reduce it somehow. So to make the actual one, I worked in the metal shop a lot this semester, created a frame. John helped me with the curve in the wood, and this is what it looks like now. Once the business and design have better communication flow between the two and are on the same level, they are better to serve the vital part that keeps us employed, the consumer. They are more likely to unknowingly follow the product cycle, or as I call it, the consumer cycle, where the product is introduced into the market and few consumers purchase it, where it grows into popularity into the market until it reaches a point of maturity, where everyone basically has one, kind of like the current generation iPhone, to a point where it'll hit an eventual decline when a new product is out on market. Again, to us designers here at Pratt, it's kind of like a upside down trajectory curve and a parabolic curve. Creating a communication mess, I tried an attempt to do a wire problem. Kind of looks like a chicken. Oops. Okay. Between the design cycle and the business cycle, and the disparity in with their lack of proper feedback and communication creates delays of products getting to market. But with this implication goes further if the consumer is not incorporated into both cycles correctly, which affects the way we work and see the design business. In some cases, with the improper addition to the consumer creates not only laziness but unfortunate designs, like those of seen on TV. Though I'm sure they are comfortable, the Snuggie is basically a blanket with armholes. And there's this current show on ABC called The Shark Tank, where consumers are brought in to pitch their own ideas. This guy is pitching his idea of providing a service to rent out grandmothers, and I believe that's his mother. I don't necessarily remember, but I kind of think it's ridiculous. These unfortunate designs only provide a bad reference for consumers who feel the need to want to purchase these products and services and demanding an upgrade of more of the same, which for us does not make our future career as fun as we thought, just more frustrating. Many companies feel differently about consumer participation. There are those that consider their own ideas rather than rely on consumer ideas like Apple. There are those that like Walmart that are attempting to gauge consumers before just purchasing and asking them what they would like to see on their shelves. And this is an online survey where one guy pitched just a toilet seat comforter. I'm not sure why. And then there are companies like Corky that try to incorporate the consumer everywhere in the process by creating a community. But taking these notes on consumer participation, I wanted to see how I could incorporate the end user to have a greater influence on the way that I do design business. So keeping the consumer in mind came about the Pop-Up Factory. This came on the suggestion of Fred that I team up with Wyman. Within both of our theses, we found it important to provide an educational tool to consumers, but for very, very different reasons. I just want to stress ultimately wanted the communication to flow among the designer of the business and the consumer a bit better and provide more of a transparent process. I wanted the designer to engage more with the consumer one-on-one. So by creating a transparent process and adding them to be part of that process, I hope to educate them to hopefully become a better consumer and not be relied upon those as seen on TV products. And then, as you've seen this before in the Pop-Up Factory presentation earlier, and Wyman and I working hard. We held the Pop-Up Factory, of course. Looking back on the Pop-Up Factory, it was a great experience for me because I got to see firsthand the communication feedback experience with all three parties involved. Us, Wyman and I, as designers, consulting with one another throughout the whole process, then directly communicating with the business and manufacturers, though it wasn't as smooth as we had hoped, and then directly engaging with the consumer, bringing everything full circle on the workshop day. We all have a common goal of creating the stool, and it was so magical to those of the participants that attended the workshop, and they were very much informed of the process, and overall it was fun. So how do designers influence business and vice versa? As of now, it's more of a hindrance to communicate with one another because of the disparity in the processes that they follow and lack of understanding. But if we designers are more proactive to adapt and compromise and or work around these hurdles together, we can collaboratively work together. Possibly we'll be able to learn their jargon and become a more relatable source for them to have a greater effect on the business end, and therefore the business end having a greater effect on us. What does the end user have to contribute to the influence and effects of the way we both do business and design? Though in some cases they dictate our designs by just purchasing the products, they should be included somewhere before to learn and have more involvement. Overall, the business should be more transparent to entice consumers to want to learn more and be a more knowledgeable consumer. So with the representation of how business and design communicate now and where it should be, creating more of an inclusive business design, along with the Pop-Up Factory, my next steps after this thesis are, of course, to find somebody to hire me, possibly right there in this nice office. But the next steps for Pop-Up Factory is in the near future, where we'll be featured in Design Week. I have also started developing a business plan, and it takes a lot of effort on my part to do the financial area of this, so it's still in progress. With only seconds left in my thesis, I hope that you have a better understanding of your design role. This journey here at Pratt has been really great. I didn't want to do this. But it's helped me shape into my design role. Thank you. this week, mine, and then questions, and then Wyman. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about your research process into business culture?
In the business culture,
Yeah.
a lot of it was from prior experience because prior to Pratt, I did work in some design firms. Thank you. And through internships, I have also interviewed various people from those from having startups to those that are currently in corporate businesses. Majority of which corporate don't necessarily associate a lot with consumers, consumer men. Yes.
I noticed that you've got, the business and designer, and you had designer, business and designer. Because business you had linked with part of the manufacturer. But is the whole purpose of the pop-up factory to eliminate to kind of bypass the distributor, retail, business side, the business side of that, to go straight to the consumer?
In this case, it was, yeah. Because Wyman and I wanted to have more involvement, and within the process, we felt if we added those elements, it would just make it more complicated. And in reality, in the real world, obviously there are those middle people, and at least for the pop-up factory, we didn't necessarily consider them. Yes, Pete.
I was curious about the pop-up factory also being an educational tool. How do you go about educating people in terms of where the materials are coming from and material costs and these sorts of things? Would you like a pamphlet, or?
Yeah, we provided a pamphlet. We actually had a more descriptive slideshow for them, showing the processes, and majority of which have video within them.
I was just curious whether that could be somewhat incorporated into the tool itself, like how you laser cut, like how you go pop-up factory into that. Like some of that information could be laser cut or silk screen onto the actual.
Right. We considered that as well, but we want, for time purposes, we tried to keep it all minimal. Yes.
Just doing the math in my head while you were presenting, I noticed that you guys didn't really take much of a profit margin on your little pop-up factory.
We thought of as students that we should just focus on the materials.
Very kind, not very corporate of you, but
no, not at all.
But I was curious, even if you had, say, a very modest profit margin, say $10 or something like that, did you find that the response once people saw what went into the materials and the assembly, that people would have been a bit more diplomatic maybe about that, the price, or do you think people valued the price of goods and services more after that pop-up factory experience?
And from the feedback that we got from after, I believe that we did. So I believe that they took it into consideration and were. We had also asked them if they would do it again, or if they would want to see more products that were more transparent in process and like that. So.
Yeah, it seems great. It seems like a great tool in that respect too, because it is so much easier maybe to just click online and buy a $15 stool that you don't know the origins or the work that went into it necessarily. I think that's a valuable lesson in that regard.
Yeah, that was the goal for both of us, or that was one of the mutual goals anyway. Yeah. Judy?
It seemed like you as a designer were interfacing more with sourcing the materials and working with the business and manufacturing side. But at the workshop, did the consumer sort of interact with that side as well, or was that more through you because you were sort of providing?
It was for this particular workshop, it was through us, mainly because it was harder to get the manufacturer to come and help present the day of. If we had it scheduled out a little bit longer and scheduled more one-on-one with the manufacturers, I believe they would have been able to come out and actually possibly demonstrate or tell their side of how they do the process day to day. Okay, thank you. Oh, sorry.
No, sorry.
You didn't raise your hand.
I don't have to. Just one quick thing. I like this idea of education and the other aspects of involving people, but do you think there's a kind of mass customization possibility? People enjoy the hands-on thing, but if they're left with being able to make their mark, no matter how small that might be. Had you thought of that, like anodized aluminum or
We have
different
thought of
colored
that.
rings, or even the screws of
Yes, we did think of that as well. Again, as students, we didn't necessarily have the funds to do that, so we were hoping from the $40 that the participant paid for us for the material that we would kind of come out even out of the whole thing. But for possible next iterations, like maybe have a plexi stool top instead of a wood stool top, and then colored rings or different wood pieces rather than just the birch that you see. Yes, Judy?
Do you think there's a difference in, so in this case, you made a gift and you had them assemble everything with you being around?
Yes.
Do you think there would be a difference in effect if they were to purchase a gift and then just assemble it themselves at home? Or?
That would be like something later down the line. That's what I'm kind of exploring. It's kind of like rivaling IKEA, I guess, but and more on a local level. Yes.
So your background was in business before you got into industrial design, did this thesis. So my question is, after you've done this, do you feel like you're a better businesswoman?
Yes, of course.
Engaging in this?
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have your costs for the stool?
In the pamphlet, I don't know that off the top of my head.
But it's a $40 stool, you said.
Around $40, yes.
For cost?
It's material cost, yes.
Including the $14 spun top, right?
Yes.
Which includes Francisco's wages, right?
Yep.
But not yours in the remaining $36?
Right. And Wyman will speak more to that in his
Okay.
thesis.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So again, because Fred's not here, I get the lucky pleasure of introducing the other half of the dream team. Wyman has taken on the very small issue of American manufacturing. He's got all the answers. He's going to tell you that. And just so you know, unfortunately I'm standing here we had big grand plans of smoke machines and the big American flag and Born in the USA playing, and Wyman's standing here with his back to you and the bandana hanging out. So if you can just imagine that in your heads for a minute, he'll be ready.
Yeah.
I have to follow that up.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Wyman Mastin, and my thesis is titled The State of this Union. Does anybody know what that is? 9.9%. I was one of those percent in 2009. That's the unemployment rate. I lost my job, and I was looking around for something to do. That's me. I came to Pratt to get new skills and to become a better designer. The State of this Union, I wanted to take a hard look at what American manufacturing was and the future of it. The revitalization of manufacturing market is crucial in order for the United States to create a sustainable economy. We are the world's #1 consumer, but we are no longer the world's #1 manufacturer through labor and a global economy that has basically weakened our foundation. I started with a few questions that I wanted answered. What is the future of manufacturing in the U.S.? Can the U.S. be competitive in industries that have long since vanished from our scope? And what effect does this have on consumerism and cultural ideology? So I started with the past. I wanted to get a clearer picture of what was going on. Industrial Revolution to Henry Ford's assembly lines, the Great Depression, World War II, the U.S. Oil embargo, and then finally the financial crisis all took its toll on American manufacturing in its own way. But I learned something even more important. Starting with the Industrial Revolution, let's take the textile industry, for instance. With the advent of the power loom, the cotton gin, and the spinning jenny, all of which helped manufacture textiles, which changed fashion and our culture. See, when everything got more easily available and cheaper, people started wearing white undergarments, and when they got dirty, they just bought more. So this was the first instance of what we consider the modern consumer. So that's what I wanted to start with. What does the modern consumer want, and how does this affect the industry? I sent out a survey asking people to pick 6 things that, and only 6 things to live with for a year, and what would they be? I got approximately 150 answers, yay me. Anything from car to shoes to clothes, but I consolidated it down into these groups. And I found out one very important thing, which was interesting because I started with the textiles, that clothes was actually the #1 on most people's list for percentages. Which led me to trying to find a case study where a modern business was dealing in the textile industry and what they were doing to set themselves apart, because it is competitive, and if they were manufacturing in the United States. I settled with Patagonia and did a lot of research. From 1972, they basically rolled out on the year, every year, a new initiative that does not necessarily have to do with their clothing. It's, for one, the Environmental Internship Program is a 2-month program that any one of their 1,200 employees can take paid leave to go join an environmental group for 2 months. They started the 1% for the Planet group, which is basically you apply, and if you get into the group, you donate 1% of your profit to environmental organizations. They've created recycling programs, and then most recently they've switched their corporate structure to a certified benefit corporation, which basically turns them into a corporation that is not they're still for profit, but they don't have to create profit. They have to create social change, which is, it's kind of an old idea mixed with a new idea. But most importantly, I found out in 2010 that they are bringing back some of their lines to the United States to be manufactured, beginning with their wool capilline line, which will be coming back to California in the coming years. So with that, I felt like I was ready. I wanted to go find a company to work with. I felt that I could try and source and manufacture products in the United States, and through my thesis advisor, I was introduced to Nomad. Nomad is an urban mobility company focused on sustainable travel products. Currently, they're working to develop a soft goods line, which is in line with the textiles that I was doing research in. And so my goal as a designer was to go find the raw materials, find the factories, deal with the consumer and the market analysis to come up with a finished product. Each Nomad product has a very specific user profile behind it. They believe that starting with this very clear picture of the functionality of their objects builds a very clear business structure. So this persona that I came up with for this pack that I was going to design for them is a rugged adventurer that will go anywhere in the city or on the open road as long as it's on 2 wheels. This started almost a 6-month scouring of the country of materials. From synthetics to naturals and then back to synthetics. A little note on synthetics. I've learned a lot about this kind of stuff, and domestic-made synthetics are pretty much all derivatives of DuPont, all nylons, and the current manufacturing process is in Kansas, but in 2006 they were bought by the Knock Industries, which I don't know if anybody knows who they are, but they're 2 brothers and they are the devil. They're a giant oil conglomerate, and they now own all the rights to DuPont's nylon manufacturing, which, in my personal opinion, before you buy another suitcase that's made out of nylon or anything, please think of the dead baby seals. So from Oregon to New Jersey to Illinois, I tried to find leather tanneries, canvas manufacturers in New Jersey and North Carolina, hardware company in Ohio, and then this is Ryan, the owner of Nomad, talking about
Nomad is
what
a
Nomad
sustainable
is.
travel and lifestyle company. Actually, it stands for Natural Organic Matter, Anno Domini. So the natural organic matter aspect is about sustainability, not just in materialization, but also social sustainability, investing in human capital, everything local as much as possible, and creating great products through good design. And the AD part is really speaking to innovation being the future of mobility. Oh, and I started Nomad because I saw that there was an opportunity, that there was a sustainable revolution going on in 2008. Saw the potential and created a whole system of products that, with a mission of simplifying travel on both a local and global scale. It's incredibly important that not only the sourcing and manufacturing is done in America from an aspect of sustainability and materialization through the viewpoint of industrial design, but also just on a human level to tell the story that everything was done here and investing in jobs in America and creating products where nothing has left America. Is design education is a very important thing to me, especially for consumers, to know how their products got in the stores and got in their hands. So the more that they can be educated about all the processes that are involved in getting that product to be to where it is in their hands as a finished, purchased product. The immediate future is to have a line of sustainable urban mobility systems, which by that is a series of products for all sorts of experiences that simplify that process, that simplify that action. My collaboration with Wyman has been fantastic. The State of this Union has really yielded significant progress in the fact that every material that I've gone ahead and chosen to incorporate into our Nomad products, Wyman has gone and found an American supplier, has educated me on the state of the American tannery and textile mill industry, and really given me a better understanding of how sourcing works in America, and showing me that there is an opportunity that it can be done. Advice is just keep going. Just keep going, keep learning, keep doing it, and things will work themselves out as you go along.
Continuing on through this process, I started dealing with the features of this pack for the user profile, developing it through a series of drawings, and then settling on a final design and getting Nomad to okay it. I began with a paper model to flush out the design ideas, which then was flattened into a one-piece pattern, which was important for the future of Nomad, so that they can either die cut or laser cut the pattern for the fabric, and it also is much more efficient. A muslin was then sewn up to test the different features of the bag and to make sure that the pattern was okay and able to move forward. With that, I then sourced the body of the main body of the bag, which is a Martinex waxed fabric, and then built the prototype. I love this bag, but I love that bike more. So the features of the bag are, it's divided into two pieces, and all the functions are denoted in red. The red pouch in the front is zipper access to a small closed pouch in the bottom, and then the upper pouch is for heavy tools or anything else that you need on your adventure. It has a rear pocket for your straps, or for a bladder, or for maps, or anything that's flat. You can detach the straps from the D-rings at the bottom and use them to attach them to your luggage rack on your motorcycle, or you can use them to detach and use the bag like a duffel bag. So it can be latched on the side like this, like a pannier on the side. It can be worn on the back, or if you're in a hurry, it can pretty much be hung anywhere. But this was a really great learning experience, and throughout this whole process, between the sourcing and the design of the bag, I learned one big thing, that you have to be able to tell the story. You have to be able to tell everyone where all of the components come from and make sure that the consumer understands that. The next thing is getting to market as soon as possible, which is crucial in funding. I've been a part of 2 startups so far since I've been in school, and one of them was killed because we weren't able to get to market first. And then the next thing is, by getting to market, creating a buzz, engaging your local community, having them actually have some sort of connection to your products is very important in this whole buy local scene that we're getting into. And the last thing is, I really need a factory. So with dealing with factories and manufacturing, one of the most important things to remember is you have to have a workforce. In the United States, we have a huge problem because pretty much all of the manufacturing, or all of the secondary education to primary education, there's no more shop classes. So manufacturers don't have a lot to pull from in this day and age. Even higher education has started to lose some of their hands-on training. The United States government has tried to help. Most of this stuff is from, the legislation is from the Depression, but our current iteration is the Workforce Investment Act, but it only serves unions and large business, and it's really hard to control where those funds are coming from. And then in dealing with all of this, I think it's very important to educate the consumer, because they are initially the workforce. So if you create that connection, maybe you can interest somebody in taking a job making things. So my answer to all of this is create a new shop class, which is the basis for the pop-up factory and how we got this whole thing started. So for me and I want to educate, engage, train, and communicate with people to help them understand that there's more out there than just ordering something offline and sticking it together, that you can make this stuff, and if you really like it, you can go learn how to do it and make it a career. It started in much of the same way as the Nomad project was to go out and source. Kat and I, again, figured out through the design process what we want, the materials that we wanted to go look at, and from Milwaukee to Lexington to Greensboro, North Carolina, we scoured the country trying to find inexpensive components and ways to make these. The metal spinning was in Greenpoint, and the aluminum came from Texas. The CNC was done in Lexington, Kentucky, and the plywood was from North Carolina. The steel and the bending, the steel was from Pennsylvania, and the bending was actually done here at Pratt. But in general, the workshop was where it all happened, and in my opinion, I'd love for this to be a mobile shop class, in one of its iterations. I think that this project in particular has a lot of room to grow and a lot of different things that it could become. And so the future of it for right now is come check us out at Wanted Design and see what we do. We have a newly designed stool and new components like a special edition design week leather seat top, which is going to be nice. Throughout this process, I've learned first, to educate and train the workforce, which is what I was just discussing. And the second thing is the relationship between designers and business, and how we really need to think about shifting our role. And being able to be aware enough to interface with manufacturers, sourcing the materials locally when possible, and then even dealing with logistics if you do have to ship stuff. But it all boils down to creating an environment where interdisciplinary collaborations can happen, a business model that supports this, and then finally, we as designers really need to learn how to make money and fund things, because that is how everything moves. A few more notes. Again, the consumer is kind of the linchpin to all of this, so we really need to work on re-educating them, and then in that, bringing back the value of work. Continue with this buy local movement, and then most importantly, tell the transparent brand story to add to the quality that we can bring back in the United States. I'm going to end with this quote. The significant problems we have cannot be solved at the same level of thinking with which they were created. Thank you.
Great topic, and great job. Huge topic. Applaud you for taking it on. I'm really interested in this myself. One of the problems I've been thinking about is that you said at the top, at the end, talking about re-educating the consumer, but since the time of Henry Ford, the consumer has been the worker.
Yeah.
So, and we as designers have trained consumers to demand good design. But the working consumer cannot afford a product that he or she wouldn't be able to afford a product that he or she makes, that he or she would appreciate as well designed and well made. So how much is the stool?
How much is the stool?
Yeah, you made it, right? So where are your wages in the cost of the stool? What does the stool actually cost? And if the people who attend your classes put their time into the making of the stool, and calculate their time and wages as fair, sustainable wages, and then you gave it a number and you put it on the market, could they afford to buy it themselves?
I think I'm going to go buy a time clock so we can punch in and punch it. I'm being serious, actually. That's a really good point. I mean, I think in regards to the participants in the workshop, we did not calculate their time. I guess from the beginning, it took them about 2 hours total to put the thing together. And I'd say Kat and I probably reasonably had about 20 hours in all the fabrication of it. But at the same time, this was the first time that we did it, and I think the second time, which is going to happen as soon as I get done talking, I'm going to go downstairs and start making the new components for Design Week. I think that the things that we've changed will definitely cut that down. So this time would be more accurate representation of how much the stool costs, and we will calculate that, and I'll let you know.
I'd just like to follow up on that, because my research was sort of along the same lines in terms of user assembly and traditionally you think like flat pack furniture, and IKEA started this as a cost-saving measure to pass on assembly and expense to the consumer. But I think the re-education aspect, we're creating value for the consumer, and the education is value added. And that can't necessarily be explained in terms of how much time they spend doing it and how much money that would cost to have somebody professionally make it. So that added benefit for the consumer has to be factored in, and I think it offsets some of the labor. If you term it labor, I think you're missing an opportunity to call it something else.
Yeah.
Another comment on the cost question. Obviously manufacturing is more efficient when it happens at a very big scale.
Yeah.
And costs also go down when there are fewer materials, fewer features, and fewer sourcing trees to follow. Can you comment on how that kind of challenge, which is maybe the primary challenge to American manufacturing influence the physical design of the products?
Probably first with the Nomad, the backpack. That really, it actually turned out to not be as expensive as I initially anticipated. The problem with the manufacturing component, which I didn't talk a whole lot about, I approached, because I was riding a very fine line. Basically, I was working with a company trying to help them source all of this stuff, and I couldn't just go to a manufacturer and be like, I want this made now, you know. And actually, I tried that, and and I came up with that exact problem. Was they wanted minimums. They wanted to talk minimums, and it wasn't my company to start talking minimums. But I did try and find out. I pushed it as hard and as far as I could go, and I think that the next iteration of Nomad's bag is going to be much simpler, actually. There were some sewing things. Most of this I did myself, and I think that the design can be simplified, and working with the components and then taking it to the manufacturer. Usually, the manufacturer has its own way of doing things, and so they're going to tell you, they're going to take your prototype and tell you how they would make it most efficiently. So I think that's probably the next step, is to do another iteration of the bag and then go to a manufacturer and have them, basically cost engineer it.
Well, I commend you on what you've done. I just want to say this, that the factory is the most wonderful environment, and the idea of outsourcing at a great distance for manufacturer parts is to deny the manufacturers, the people who actually do this stuff, and the designer, what is really the soul of industrial design. And the sort of pride that we can have, and the implied community of actually working with somebody locally and taking care with it, giving the designer a chance to design the way a thing is made or co-design it, is really important. The fact you identified that as a kind of community is exactly right.
I think that I bumbled it a little bit in my presentation, but I grew up with a really talented cabinet maker father, and I always had a shop at my fingertips. And I look back at even when I was in high school, we didn't have a shop class, but I was lucky enough to have a shop of my own. And I think to myself, if you never had been exposed to this, or never had any idea that you can make things, or the joy that comes in that that is sorely missed in our consumer ideology, our culture, all of these aspects, and solved will probably help this country quite a bit. Thanks, guys. We're going to take a quick 5-minute break to stretch our legs. Please come back and hear Jonathan's thesis.
Yeah.
Leave them.
Operation cool down. This air conditioner is on, but that one's loud and it picks up on